Hey, Professor Alex Hinton, thank you so much for very gracefully agreeing to be interviewed. As you know, we are at this historic place, the Maung Tribunal building, and above us you had testified against the Khmer leaders who attempted to get off the hook, and you're one of the world's authorities, or foremost authorities, on the subject of genocide, and in particular Cambodia. But you have a vast knowledge of why genocide happened, why killers kill. Can you explain what genocide is? Forget the legal definition of this, from an anthropological and real-world perspective. What is a genocide?
Yeah, no, it's a great, first of all, thanks for having me on, and wow, it's very strange to be here. We can't see it, those who are listening in today can't see where we are, but I actually, before I testified at the tribunal, I would actually be in this area, waiting, and nearby was Jia, and Kusan was the holding cell for them.
So, the Khmer leaders?
They would go from the detention center where they're held, that was nearby there, and they would actually come in here before the proceedings. And so even before you went up in the courtroom near them, you were near them, like literally where we are right now. So that's kind of unsettling a little bit to go back to some of the issues, that we talked about while we've been here. But, so I think the definition of genocide, we actually have to consider illegal, because this word is used in lots of different ways, and there's lots of misunderstanding about it. So, if we think about critical thinking, there are two important dimensions to it, among others. But one is to understand the history of a term and how it came to have one or more senses in the present, what the different senses are, and the other is to sort of unpack the meanings of something. So, the word floats in a lot of different ways, but in general, and especially this is true with the conflict in Israel and Gaza right now, the word's used all sorts of different ways. And so people don't understand, if they don't understand the different senses, think critically about it, and probably don't have time to talk about the history, but that will be another part of unpacking. Well, we can just do the three different senses. So you mentioned the legal sense, right? So the legal sense emerged after the Holocaust, what is now the Holocaust. Actually, at the time, was the destruction of the European Jews. And Raphael Lemkin, the person who coined it, had grown up. He was Jewish, so he knew the terms of pogroms, but he also knew about the Armenian genocide. He read history, and so his purview was vast and broad. And he had original concepts about crimes of barbarity, vandalism, which became sort of genocide and cultural genocide. And he made it his mission in life to criminalize genocide. His thing was, well, you get arrested if you kill a person. Well, if you kill 1 million people, you don't get arrested. And so this became his passion. And the reason it sort of bears up in current debates is because he came forward, what had happened during World War II, the Nazis sort of established the moment when this could be criminalized. But he had his sort of what I call social scientific definition, right? And that definition was the idea that you intend to destroy a group of whatever identity. And there can be many different identities. So I'm left-handed. Well, being left-handed is stigmatized in many countries. So it's possible that people who are left-handed could be targeted in a country. Or let's say color of someone's eyes, right? There's actually a famous experiment in the States about blue eyes, brown eyes, people start being categorized, bad things start happening that were stigmatized. But this is sort of the idea that it's an attack on people who have an identity and you try and destroy them. But this came to the UN. So the UN was created, 45, it gets going, and the very first resolution they have actually is like what I said, it's the intent to destroy a group because of who they are. It includes political groups, economic groups. So we're here in Cambodia right now, and marriage targeted class enemies, right? And they actually called it a class revenge, a class threat. But that got washed out of the UN definition. And so in the end, people argued with each other and debated. There's sort of a 1946 resolution that was capacious, that included a broad range of groups, had been winnowed down to 4 protected groups. So it's a lot better to have a convention than not have one, but it's limited. So, political groups aren't covered, economic groups aren't covered, left-handed people aren't covered, gender is not covered, right? But it is what it is. But the sort of the legal definition involves this idea of intent to destroy a group, and then has this weird language in whole or in part. And, that's what does it mean in whole or in part? So if you have 100,000 people and you kill 5,000 of them, is that genocide? Or do you have to kill over half of them? And so lawyers debate this. But, and I won't go into all the different things. There are a series of acts within it. But the key thing about this is, for example, you have to prove intent. So when people say, is it genocide? And again, it's all in our current moment. First, we're talking about in terms of Ukraine and Russia. We talked about the leader, Rohingya, and now we're talking about it. And we're also not talking about things. We're not talking about Sudan. We're not talking about the DRC. I mean, there are all sorts of places in the world. We're not talking about Haiti. It's sort of a different thing. Maybe we can talk about it. There's time, but it's like words direct attention. And when they direct attention to something, they direct attention away from something. And this is one of the sort of negative things of the word genocide, because people immediately say, well, it's a genocide. Hashtag, that was a genocide. Well, so virtually everyone, we just, as we're sitting here, we just had the ICC is quite likely going to indict both the leader of Israel, God, and Hamas of crimes against humanity and war crimes. And in fact, I think those cases are easy to prove. So why is it that we have to get in a debate about whether something is genocide that has to equal the Holocaust, which through Holocaust education is sort of similar? It diverts us away from the reality. So we can have these arguments. Is it genocide? Well, you have crimes against humanity and war crimes. That's bad. That's horrific. Why are we wasting our time? And so the legal thing comes in. I owe you the two other definitions, which I'll get to. But it's important because this is what people are obsessed with, right? So what do we do? Well, South Africa has a case that brings it against Israel. So where's it going? It's getting lawyered up. So now we got the cases, and that's great. Maybe 5 years from now, we'll have some sort of legal determination, which is a legal determination based on the legal definition, right? But if you do other definitions, but the point is, how many more people are going to die while we're debating this word genocide when horrific crimes have taken place? Right. On both sides. It's important to see, Hamas did horrific things, and Israel's done horrific things. Right. And so it's great that the ICC is doing this. I hope people eventually see this sort of deflection that the word genocide obsession with it can do. So you have the legal definition, and then you have the sort of Lincoln definition, which is social scientific. I could go on the sort of different versions of this. Lincoln himself saw genocide as something where this was done with the Nazis who went into different places they occupy, and they attacked and dismantled the local culture, the political system, the moral system, and they imposed, their own system on those places. And that was, at the time, what he saw as genocide. But the key part was its intent to destroy a group, its way of life. And for Lincoln, it was the spirit of the group. So it could be culture, right? It could be forbidding people to practice their religion. And that gets strained out of the legal definition. And then, I'm realizing I'm going on a little long, but there's one important point to make with the history part, which is that through time, initially, now everyone talks about, for example, Holocaust education and the Holocaust, and everyone knows about it. Many people throughout the world. And they know, with the Nazis, Auschwitz, people being cremated, killed en masse. And so now you have a huge number of people who, when they think of genocide, they don't think in terms of legal definitions, they don't think in terms of they think in terms of prototypes, exemplars. They say, well, this looks a lot like the terrific things that took place. And so, just to wrap up, we can call this the conventional definition, which is sort of like some resemblance to social science definition, and the legal definition, and these get all confused.
I want to return to something you said, people obsessed with genocide. Maybe we should unpack or even rephrase the term Raphael Lemkin coined, genocide, destruction of population or groups, if you will, identity-based groups, and outside of legal definition. because his definition, my own understanding, was rooted in the long historical, centuries-old practice of populations, the military conquered or under occupation, that destroy in whole or in part. And my understanding is that he was looking across the world, similar incidents that large-scale destructions that took place in antiquity, going back to the Greek era, the Mesopotamia, the Far East like Japan, the whole-scale destruction of persecution of converted Christians by the Samurais and Shinto.
Absolutely.
Right. Then, he also studied in Krakow before he moved to Kashmir in Ladino. Yeah. At Krakow, as you know, the Genghis Khan and Mongolian troops, the invaders, they overran Budapest, Krakow, and then all the way to Russia, like St. Petersburg. And they've taken thousands of native children away. And he also, I think that was one of the reasons that there's a transfer of children from one group to another, right? That became an act. So I'm just wondering why this historical phenomenon. And also the second point you mentioned, the people don't wait for the courts or legal authorities or states to make this so-called determination. Like in the case of Cambodia, this Cambodia has never been declared country that suffered genocide, legally speaking. But even this bill, correct me if I'm wrong, right?
No, they did find it genocide.
In the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's 4 decades after.
And only 2 groups.
Exactly, right? And then so Vietnamese and the Cham.
Yeah.
And so, but it's such a powerful concept. And my view is the general global public get what the spirit that drove Lemkin to come up and devote his whole life, right? It's the states and legal professional community that don't get it. And so why does this phenomenon persist over literally centuries?
Yeah.
How do you explain it from a scientific perspective?
Yeah, so that's a big question, and as a social scientist, of course, you would not want to just reduce everything down to singular causes, but there are certainly causes that you see that cut through them. Sort of to go to the first part of your question, though, we actually have a word, even a legal word that links into this, crimes against humanity. And the difference with crimes against humanity is it's a widespread attack. It doesn't have to have intent, which is super difficult. So in fact, we have a word that could be used to describe all these things that would resonate much more with the conventional sense, and that's sort of inside. So when I think crimes against humanity, if you just hear that word, it's a crime against humanity. It's awful. But in terms of causes, land, wanting land, settler colonialism, going in and wanting territory, right? Some sort of gain, and then this is the question of intent versus motive. What do you want to do? So you can hate a group and want to eradicate them because of who they are. They're somehow contaminating in terms of pure community. So that fits Cambodia case, fits Nazi ideology. If we go back and talk about settler colonialism, there's hatred, sure, but in the end, there's a desire of material gain that's driving. Not to say there wasn't in the Holocaust, obviously there was. So I would say settler colonialism, material gain is a factor. Human beings, I mentioned the brown eyes, blue eyes. Well, so here we maybe there's a psychoanalytic dimension at the core of all of us. As I think we've discussed in other times, in other contexts, people have sort of void that they want to fill, and an emptiness, and they're not comfortable with that. It's part of the human condition. And so they seek, and we're in Cambodia, which is a Buddhist country, and this is sort of the core of Buddhism. they seek out attachments. They seek out something to fill the void. And one way to fill that void is to be part of a larger group, a larger entity. And we'll have you a group identity. Well, all groups, right? Groups don't exist. They exist in opposition to, or right across something else, another group that's aligned against it, like an ethnic movement boundary, if you will, or boundary. And so what you get is this investment in a group. And to strengthen the group, what do? Well, you target someone who's threatening to the group. You stigmatize them. You say they're a threat, an impurity, they're a danger. And you can already tell from the language, the motivation to crush them is already implicit within that. So I think this is something that from a developmental, interpersonal, and state level all merge. So you have the body politic, politicians know how to manipulate this. They say something that resonates with people. People have this emptiness, it becomes filled. Some people do, not everyone, obviously. And I think that's another driver. So, we've been talking about material meaning, but I think it's absolutely important to talk about people and meaning in life. Existential anxiety is another driver. So these are, we could talk about many drivers, but these are some of the important ones. And a statement mobilizes, uses power to demarcate people, to put people in carceral institutions, put them in a place where they can be killed, round them up, and then kill them. So it's like a process that unfolds.
When you say, humans think in categories and groups. You've got people in groups, category. It is almost encoded in the way we look at the world.
Absolutely.
And it is. So sort of race is one category, but faith is another, ideology is another, class, and the primarily economics. And we've got these, what we used to call tribes, but nation states, like multiple tribes, multiple populations inhabiting a political organization that is singular.
And that is then manipulated by leaders. Now, so that, and I want to sort of underscore the point you just made of we all want to distance ourselves from perpetrators. But we want to dispel it, because if we go back to that sort of aspect of ourselves being filled with void and uncomfortableness, that which unsettles, right, about our being, our sense of identity, it's very uncomfortable to think that, right, that I might be capable of doing that. Well, there's vast amount of evidence that almost anyone is capable of doing horrific things, including becoming a perpetrator. Go into the literature, it's asked, Ordinary Minutes, book by Christopher Crown, gets into it. So the question then becomes, well, what is it that already is part of us in our lives and then gets globalized in extraordinary circumstances? So we're ordinary people. Sure, there's some sadists, psychopaths, a very small portion of people. Most of the people aren't ordinary people. So what is it? Then you touched upon an absolute critical factor, which is that human beings think in terms of binaries. They categorize. We have to. We go insane if we didn't have categories. If we didn't have schemas to map our worlds, how we function in it. It's part of being human. And so this fundamental aspect of violence, culminating in extreme and perhaps humanity or genocide, is part of our everyday being. And, when I was here and gave my talk, I talked about Adorno, who's a philosopher, and he's written a number of dialectic enlightenment. He also talked in his essay that I talked about here, Education After Auschwitz, and he sort of zeroes in on a number of things, lack of empathy. You should categorize people, you differentiate, boldness, it's important. But in the end, what's really at the center is this paradox. So we think in terms of category, we simplify reality, and then you get the basis for stigmatizing. And so for him, even in that essay, he says at one point, I really shouldn't say it. I shouldn't say it. So he's writing, and he's giving this as a radio address. He says, well, but I guess I need to say it. He starts talking about the character. But what he's done is he's couched before he's using a category the fact he is using a category. And this goes back to critical thinking. Anytime we're considering or thinking about something, and we go insane if we did it all the time, but it's incumbent upon all of us, it's a responsibility to constantly think critically about the categories that we're using, especially when we relate to other human beings. And That, in one sense, sounds easy. It's not easy. It's hard because that word natural, and I use that in a sort of category of the natural, it's something that's naturalized in us. And how do you become aware of something that's naturalized? Because it's natural, so to speak. And that's the work. You can do it historically by historicizing. You can do it anthropologically by going out and learning about other cultures. Whatever you can get, talking to other people with different beliefs, to come back and be able to see yourself differently and to see the way you use metaphors. It involves destabilization, unsettling, and as the word unsettling says, it's not comfortable. So, what is genocide education? It's an ability to live the void, as we talked about. It's an ability to be willing to unsettle. But it's hard. A lot of people don't want to do it.
How do you explain that? All these beautiful spiritual systems that attempt to bring humans above, the innate savageries, that's warlords, but fall into this, criminal space.
And this is the part of it. Whether religions are foreign, their spiritual traditions are followed, what happens? Well, they become linked to the state, right? So you have Buddhism, the idea of the Dhamma-raja. You're entitled to defend the Buddhist order. So it actually connects back up to power again, and the fear that maybe something else is going to come in and take over. And so I think religion very easily becomes coupled with state dynamics, state power, and the things that we were talking about before. And that's the picture of people on the ground, right? They can do that in the practice, but what's being done by the people in positions of power diverges from what should be done. So this is where leaders fail us.
Yeah, the organizations of states that have an objective, non-human interests and calculations that reduce people into what the U.S. State Department coins as collateral damage. Right? So for my final question is how do we overcome this, inculcated tribal mindset? It is us Khmer versus Vietnamese versus Cham, or it is us Burmese Buddhists against Rohingyas and Muslims, or it is us, the Israeli against things like human and animals. How do we overcome these conditions, public sentiments?
Yeah, well, and this is the depressing part of the answer. We don't, because I think this is always going to be there, right? Just like it's constantly a struggle for us to think critically. In some sense, this is always something. It's not like we're going to reach this sublime state or something as never again is fulfilled. Never again isn't a singular. It's something that you try and do. It's a process, and you fail. It's going to fail. It has failed. There have been successes. People don't pay attention to those very often. It's the same thing. So what does it mean? It means that the two of us, everyone has a responsibility to speak out, to undertake the hard work of critical thinking. And, if states are doing bad things, to go and hold people accountable. Maybe and then we think back to Plato and the Republic. You don't want the philosopher who keeps running things. You want someone who doesn't want power. You want someone who doesn't crave it, who goes there, is there for a short time, and goes away. It's when people crave to dominate others, even in religious orders. That's when problems begin. But it's also the recognition that this is something that's possible for any of us to do. It's part of the existence of the human being to think in terms of categories. And again, we can constantly challenge, and then when we see situations where things are happening to other groups, we have that responsibility, as I think you've done in work, to speak out. Right. And that's everyone's responsibility from that point of view.
Yeah. Well, for my very, very last question. We've come a very, very long way from, hunter and gatherer social units. Send humans to moon, the different nations, India, China, Japan, South Korea, Russia, the USA. Right. They're sending satellites going to Mars, exploring telescopes in the space. Right. Thousands and thousands of the satellites that are taking pictures 24/7 of our Earth, right? And then artificial intelligence, like the internet, the electricity. Those are extraordinary human achievements. Yeah. And yet our mind remains, when we are in that genocidal mind of space, we have not moved away from this, what we used to call savage space.
Yeah.
How do we? Why are our institutions, like universities and schools and curricula, failing to transform humans into a more advanced species that say genocide is not thinkable?
Yeah, well, so again, based on what we said, I'm going to tell part of my answer, which is that we're never going to sort of reach that ideal state. And this goes back to the notion of dialectic enlightenment. It's that the conditions of, absolutely horrific things happening are in this thing that we say is civilization in contrast to things like savagery now. So the more fantastic technologies, we have fantasies that somehow will be liberated through them. All those technologies have the ability to do horrible things. So I'm not sure educational institutions have failed us. I think good educational institutions teach people to think critically. And if they do that, that's the groundwork, and sort of brings us back to education after Auschwitz, of what needs to be done. And if you want to prevent it, you have to create critical, self-reflecting people. And that doesn't mean they think like you, quite the opposite. They may think in very different ways. But it's that tool of thinking critically and willing to live with something that's uncomfortable, as we've talked about before, with a void, and to reconsider those things that hold dear, and being, listening to other people. Listening is hard. And that, again, good education is going to teach people all those different things.
Professor Hinton, on that note, I thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.